So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this second day of the consultation with member states. We are very pleased to have you here. Again, few notes on logistics. We are going to have English on channel 2 and French on channel 3. So you can hear all presentations and interventions in both languages. And without further ado, I'm gonna leave the floor to our Associate Vice President, Satu Santala, in charge of External Relations and Governance Department. Thank you very much, Satu.
Thank you very much, and a very good morning to everyone. And also on my behalf, welcome to IFAD for the second day of this consultation. And it's a real pleasure for me to be here, and I'm very pleased to hear that yesterday you had a day of very rich conversations, and I'm sure today will be equally so. So just to kick off your conversations and day to day, a few thoughts from my side. We're all, of course, very painfully aware of how big an impact climate change is having in rural communities in low and middle income countries. And these countries and these areas are largely dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods and for survival, really. So this just reminds us how important small-scale farmers and support to them is today. In Africa, for instance, the impact of climate change and land degradation in rural areas are among main drivers of rural exodus, regional mobility, and migration. And this is the impact of climate change that are not in the future but today is the reason that also IFAD is very committed to addressing climate within our work. In the latest replenishment consultations that just closed in December, we are now committed to that 45% of our core financing goes to climate change, and that's a very big stretch target for us because we're very strict in how we record our climate finance. And out of that climate finance, about 90% goes to adaptation, just because of the work we do with smallholders and rural communities. But of course, the magnitude of these issues is far beyond what IFAD alone can do and what we can do with our own core financing. And that's why we like to think of ourselves as an assembler of finance. What that means really is that we work with other financiers and other partners to bring financial resources to the rural communities. Often smallholders, rural poor, have very much difficulty in accessing international finance or finance overall. So that's the role we can play, and being that connector and that assembler of finance. We've scaled up, for example, quite significantly our partnership with the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, and the Adaptation Fund, and we aim to mobilize up to 2 billion in climate funds by 2027. We've also now included in our replenishment a new tool, we call it the Additional Climate Contributions, and this enables us to channel further climate finance through our core resources. We're also mobilizing finance through a number of important initiatives, including our Enhanced Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture program called ASA+, the African Integrated Climate Risk Management program, or the Inclusive Green Financing Initiative, both of which are funded by GCF. And of course, very importantly, we also rely on our financing facility for remittances, which is a $70 million multi-donor funded facility that's grown over the years and is now globally recognized as a center of excellence on the topic of migrants' remittances and diaspora investment for sustainable development. And this is not a small thing to have achieved, because it's an area where intuitively all of us think, there's a lot of potential here, but to then actually do it in practice has been quite a journey. We are very grateful for the support from member states and from donor resources. And many of you who are here today, we're very grateful for your contributions. And with that support, we now have a portfolio of over 70 projects in partnership with public and private partners worldwide. But of course, we have the ambition to do more. We're never stopping where we are. And it's precisely for this reason that IFAD and the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the UNCCD, have recently partnered to contribute to sustainability, stability, and security, the so-called 3S initiative in Africa. And this partnership will aim to increase the capacity of rural families and their communities to build climate resilience and improve sustainable land management. This initiative will enhance livelihoods, food and water security, rural youth employment, and ultimately reduce incentives for migration due to climate change. Yesterday, you had the opportunity to listen to renowned experts and practitioners in their field, and they've enlightened us on relevant recommendations, among which the importance of focusing on targeted financial inclusion actions and building knowledge to inform migrants about climate solutions. In particular, jointly with UNCCD, you've been presented with a new tentative approach to how to engage diaspora investors in resilient rural investments and sustainable land use. Of course, migrants are already investing in climate adaptation strategies, maybe not exactly with that name, but it is happening. But they need adequate support, dedicated instruments, and an enabling environment to continue doing so. And they, of course, need good information and specific technical assistance as well. Moreover, remittances can be instrumental in expanding access to financial products that facilitate resilience building and innovative products like weather insurance embedded in agricultural loans. I'm sure that today you'll have an equally enriching day. I encourage you to continue to share your perspectives, policies from your countries, good practices, and any ideas in really addressing the nexus between migration and climate change, and guide us how to better align the proposed actions with your national contexts as well. And your precious inputs will be crucial to help us improve the presented approach and move towards a solid and successful program structure and implementation. So with these few words, I want to conclude and wish you a really interesting day and look forward to hearing more about your deliberations after. Thank you.
Thank you, Sato, for that. I think it frames the morning very well for our needs. I would like to maybe say a few words on the takeaways from yesterday and a little bit about the agenda, our expectations for this morning, but also listen about your expectations for this morning. Most of you were there yesterday. We will revisit a bit our conclusions, but specifically we would like to hear from you. Not only your thoughts, I think yesterday it was very engaging. We could have extended the meeting one more hour to have the opportunity of everyone to convey their comments. So this morning it's another opportunity to do that, to clear the doubts that you might have on this, for us also to understand the positioning of your countries or the institutions you represent, to understand better how to frame the idea that is proposed to you today. So the first thing in expectations, I think, from us is to have an interactive set of panels where we can pick your brains, let's say, on your thoughts about what you read, about the concept that is proposed. Summarizing a little bit some of my takeaways, and then I will also give the floor to my colleagues to share those from yesterday. I think we did overall, I hope, a good job in clearing the air of sort of misconceptions around this very important topic of migration and particularly migrant contributions to development. We analyze what pushes migration. We know that climate now is in the list of the pushing mechanism. It used to be just economic downturn or conflict and insecurity. Climate, the effect of climate is there, and we're seeing this more and more at IFAD. The issue of migration is popping up as we go, and to be honest, it's a delicate one, and it's very difficult to address it for that particular reason. And at IFAD, we are trying to do that, but as Satu mentioned it very well as well, IFAD has been working on this issue, on the continuity of that circle that we discussed, migration generating return in terms of contributions from migrants back home to support the ones that left behind, because this migration, the sad story, is partial. It is, as we said yesterday, equal to a family fracture every single time, because it is not an entire family that leaves. It is sometimes the most entrepreneurial member of that family that leaves so they can work somewhere abroad, sometimes bypassing the cities and going abroad to provide with their loved ones. So we understand that maybe these contributions, if maximized, which they're not today, they're crucial. As we know, they are what we call the way for millions of migrants, 200 million migrants supporting 800 million family members to achieve their own SDGs, because that's what remittances do. They put food on the table, as we heard, they buy medicine, they also invested in youth because they pay for education. They are also, for one or 25% of it, invested in agriculture. The numbers are staggering. The investment in agriculture from that remittances, that small figure multiplied by so many times, is actually 4 times global ODA to agriculture. So at IFAD, when we see that figure, we remain humble, and this is what migrants and their families are doing. So how can we maximize? If we can have a leverage effect of 2 even, the impact would be enormous. So, and we would be able maybe to curtail that circle, that vicious circle where migration for many rural families become more of an option rather than a necessity as we see it. So this is, again, the proposal was maximize all the lessons learned that IFAD has been gathering for the last 15 years. I don't know if you've seen some of the projects that are there, publications. I know we're more in a virtual world, but I suggest that you pick some of them, because the interesting thing about this is these are solutions that are viable. These are solutions proposed by the private sector. So we have more of a catalytic effect at IFAD of inciting the private sector to engage in area, to invest in rural areas, because it could be a win-win. Normally, these words don't really come together. And this is what we're proposing, the approach on remittances. What can be done? Always knowing that part of that serves climate adaptation. How can we strengthen this through the better access to remittances to rural areas, its use, linkage with financial inclusion? And we saw yesterday, and I believe, I hope I clear the air as well on that, in misconceptions, that when we look at diaspora investment, we need to look at other ways of doing things. Money might come from the same pocket, but different purpose. Supporting your family is one thing. You're not going to tell any of your family, you're not going to allow me to tell any of your family members where the money that you're sending to your relatives should be for. I will be lynched. So I don't want to, of course we cannot do that, but we can give more options. And I believe that that's very interesting for you. And if your family members have access to savings, credit, and insurance, that's maybe the beginning of that resilience that we're trying to see. Some of it, again, for climate adaptation that is used. The rest, the 10% that is saved by the diaspora, equal to another big 500 or $500 billion globally, is a financial pod in search of financial options as well. And they are keen in looking at those possibilities. But if we look at investment from diaspora today, from point A to point B, it's a bush path. meaning it's very dangerous, it's very uncertain, it's very risky, and I think institutions like IFAD and others could clear the path, could make it easier. We can pave the way, we can electrify the way, we can make it simpler for diaspora to be able to invest back home, try to diminish the risk, create a trend, because the desire is that. And I think my takeaway yesterday was we need to focus in the people behind this money, because remittances is a financial term, diaspora investment as well. It's the people behind, it's their needs that we need to look at. And this is the way that we have framed this proposal. And we'd love to hear about some of the points that you would have to say in how can we bring this to bear. This proposal is a concept that could be applied at any country where migration remittances are relevant. We said, just as a reminder, any country that has remittances over 3%, it's a country that should be looking at this, because that just shows that it's extremely important for that country. We have countries where that relationship goes to 23% of GDP, and where no strategies are created, and we characterize that as more than a missed opportunity. It's almost a crime, if I may say so. So that's, I think, the takeaways that we had. I would like to leave the floor to my colleagues also, if they want to add, Maxime or Catherine, on your takeaways before we go to a summary of. We presented the proposal to a PowerPoint. We would like to revisit this a bit and then start engaging with you on those. Maxime?
Yeah, just as I said yesterday, it's always hard, to talk after you, So I will be quick, For me, my main takeaway from yesterday was to see a lot of opportunity in the context of what's happening right now in the country, in terms of land use planning, land management, and projects that are dealing with this issue in climate adaptation, and in terms of also of actors that could be very involved in the approach we want to promote within the country. Satu mentioned, you mentioned like the ASAP program. This is an opportunity. There is also this VAX approach also that is set up right now. This is also an opportunity, and so we will need to have like this discussion more maybe at the regional level or directly bilaterally with country to see where we can fit this approach in existing program or program that are already in design within IFAD, and also with some other donors in where we are donors we are working with. So for me, just like we need to explore this opportunity. Today is a day to do that, with our colleague from UNCCD, the secretariat, and also the focal point. But for me, this is still the beginning of the effort. We need to go, and maybe one of them, maybe Catherine, you will mention that, but we will have like the COP of UNCCD and the end of 2024, and I guess it will be maybe like the place and the moment, to show our progress on this what we have done, since for the last 8 months in December. Please, Catherine.
Okay, so thank you and good morning, everyone. I think for us at UNCCD, and particularly for the global mechanism, one of the big pressures we have, as our focal points is to deliver resources to the countries on the ground. So for us, this partnership with IFAD, I think, is something that's been growing and has allowed us to start concretely defining what we're going to do under the 3S initiative. So I think the main takeaway, I think, for me yesterday was getting our focal points to look at other ways to access resources. It's not the traditional approach we've used. So I hope all the presentations that were made yesterday enlightened you, particularly on a topic that we don't traditionally deal with, but hearing from the experts themselves and hearing from some of the exciting examples that were presented. So I think for us, we've definitely moved one step forward, and I think today what's important is to hear from the countries themselves on how the ideas, the suggestions, the model that's being proposed resonates with the countries. So I know a number of the countries sitting here had already attempted to work on some proposals, which we did share with IFAD. But I think we're now moving from that stage to try now and really look at the suggestions that are being proposed. How can we internalize that? How do we domesticate that? How do we upscale some of the good practices? Do we have the enabling environment? How do we move from talk to action? And how do we take the model being presented, apply it in our countries, and find ways to mobilize resources to implement? So I think for me, I'm really looking forward to today, particularly hearing back from the countries. What do you think will work? What won't work? What is it that we can support with, particularly working with a strong institution like IFAD, where they've got a lot of experience in this area? Thank you.
Pedro, if I may, maybe a very last point on my side. What we heard yesterday, I think, is also that currently we reached a point where there are a lot of actions and activities and literature about the important role that economic contribution of migrants through the remittances they send, the investment they make, they have on, it has on sustainable development. And IFAD is also the proof, Satu just say that we are a center of excellence on remittance and diaspora investment. This is recognized, and we have a lot of projects that to prove that. But not only IFAD, there are a lot of international organizations and actors that are working on this topic, and it is gaining traction in the international agenda. At the same time, there is a lot of literature and a lot of work also on climate adaptation, on addressing climate change, climate hazards. And IFAD also is proven to work a lot, has invested millions in land restoration, in this kind of topics. Now, what we are trying to do now is to create the bridge between the two topics that not often talks together. Actually, this is one of the first experiments, one of the first tests that we are putting together here in IFAD. If you look around online or around among all the various actors that are working on the two topics, you won't see yet this bridge. And this is why we are here today. We are trying to test and to see with you if this approach can be functional, can work, because we are taking a step forward. We are now telling migrants and diaspora investments, we can help you also supporting your families, not only on the general support to development of your communities or your families to reach your own SDGs, but also to help you addressing the climate hazards and the climate risks that you are facing on a daily basis. That's on my side. Thank you.
And just to complement, not only to help them, but to help them do better. Because this is what is being humbling more over the last year as we're digging more into that, is that they're already doing. And I would like to, during the conversations, I mentioned a story yesterday about a project that we did in the Philippines. We have a very nice video. I will take at some point the time to show you that. So to be sure that you see it, so you can hear directly from migrants how they face it. They don't call it climate adaptation. They don't even say the word climate. They just said we needed to build a house because every year the typhoon comes and that's it. It's game over and we need to start again. So there's some examples like this, and I think Mr. Wilson will also reiterate this. The bridges between the topics are already there. At operational level is where they're not. Could they need more support in doing that? Yes, the remittances, as I said, to build a typhoon-resistant house, they could not just get a loan and get it. They just could not. With financial inclusion and access to a financial institution, they could have. And that would reduce many of the strains that they had. It could also invest in other things. So this, again, multiplied by the millions that have needs to address their climate adaptation needs, is where we see what could operations involving local communities or local governments, national governments, international organizations could do, or even in our programs. How can we fit that in? my last takeaway was what we realized yesterday, or what at least what we mentioned and what we've seen, is that this topic of migrant contribution has always been some sort of a sugar coating on top of other initiatives. And unfortunately, it always looked just about the money. We have a fantastic project. Oh, I heard migrants send so much money. Could we grab some of that? Again, this is a very serious aspect, again, to consider, because it happens at up to the highest level at governments, within governments. It's a natural consideration that we can think of. But the trick, again, is would you put some of the money, that your private money for your family, and devoted it to a governmental or community initiative? If you have funds for that, yes. Otherwise, no. What you need is more options. So that, I think, is on an operational level for IFAD. It means that we need to look at these stakeholders, this target group. They're a target group on their own, those that receive remittances, those that send it, those that also want to invest. That type of investors need to be put into a list of specific investors, because they have their specific needs. And if we address them, I think it could be a win-win. If we don't address them, we're just going to lose them. And that's it. So this is why the sugar coating, if I might use that expression, has not proven to be the most efficient way of mainstreaming this topic. That was my other takeaway. We would love to hear from you firsthand. Maybe before we go into the presentation, extending the presentation of yesterday. I don't know if anybody wants to. The only suggestion I say is, if you want to say something, just to do this with a microphone, and we'll give. And the same time, yes. And I know you need to be excused. I know you're late already. So, but thank you so much, Sato, for joining us this morning. But
Thank you.
yes.
Thanks. Thank you very much. From my side, I was there right at the beginning of the 3S initiative, as I know a couple of people in the room were. And part of the thinking behind the 3S initiative at the beginning was during the migrant crisis of 2015. It was a proper crisis. Everybody panicked, right? And the thing that really came across really very strongly with the 3S initiative is they were mad. The African countries that created the 3S initiative were mad. There's like, the Europeans have lost their minds, that they think a root cause of migration is the people smugglers in Agadez. That is not a root cause of migration. They've lost their minds. So the 3S initiative was a really strong position from the African governments, who were like, okay, stepping back, let's look at the root causes of what's happening in our region. And in the region, the drivers of migration are climate change, they are falling productivity, and the kind of the rational assessment of why people were moving from rural areas to the cities, and most that's what they're doing, and then some moving further away. So just let's be a little bit more rational about it. So the 3S initiative had quite a big impact on the Global Compact on migration, identifying land degradation, desertification, climate change as a key driver. But I think what it did do, and what it kind of has put at the centre, and it's the same takeaway, that I think it's the same thing. It humanised in our space the conversation about migration. That had always been a bulk conversation. The decision to move is a rational decision. It makes perfect sense in the context of where you're sitting. So let's not patronise people. And I think that's the other side of the conversation that we're also talking about in terms of remittances and investments. It's the same takeaway. Let's not patronise people. It's their money, and they will invest where it's rational to invest. And our job is to, if we want to engage with migrants and we want to engage with diaspora investments, is to make this a rational choice. They're rational people. Let's make it a rational choice for them. And yeah. And individualize it. This is individual humans with rational decision-making capacities. Let's harness that if we can. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, can I add to that? You're absolutely right. And I like the fact that you bring it to the individual. Yes, we get absorbed by this 669 billion. Imagine what we could do when in reality it's $200. And it's the dichotomy of $200 that you need to maximize. And it is indeed a rational decision. Here, we are dealing with migration, like it or not. It's a reality for many. It has been a necessity. But the objective, as you say, it's very rational. The idea is to move, work, send money. We're just trying to make sure that that dream or that mission is better achieved in the end, so they don't need to replicate it over and over and over. And we heard yesterday some stories about that, where the idea is send money and be able to return in many ways. Well, if that could be supported and through the maximization of remittances, it's better for not only for them, and again, benefiting also the communities where they live. So thank you, Luis, for adding that. I don't know if there's other interventions from before we start. Any remarks? No, then maybe we go into we revisit some of the, we're gonna have the presentation on the screen, correct? So I will give the floor to my two colleagues, Stephen Wilson and Frédéric Ponceau. There was a lot of questions yesterday regarding the content of the PowerPoint. This is again something that is summarized. We would expand more on the type of partnerships that are required for that. But first, maybe tap it.
Okay. Great. Well, we'll review this one more time, and as Pedro has suggested, the real reason for our meeting this morning is to find out from the countries and the stakeholders how you see this. I think we're very interested in any doubts you might have, or uncertainties, or questions that haven't been fully addressed. It is, again, a new framing. The word was used, bridge. The word bridge comes up. It's an excellent metaphor for what we're attempting to do about a constellation of real-world problems that are affecting rational people in very serious ways. So the overall, again, objective of this partnership with the UNCCD is look at diaspora resources, migrant remittances, and diaspora investment as part of a response to the challenges of the Sahel region. Again, this challenge has a dramatic impact on lives and livelihoods. Unsustainable practices with land and desertification clearly make this problem worse, creating more suffering, more food and water insecurity, and even exacerbating migration and climate change. One outcome we would hope by successful interventions is to reduce the incentives for particularly rural youth, but everyone to migrate. This is, of course, in the face of global climate finance, which still favors climate mitigation, those constellation of efforts aimed at reducing the greenhouse gas emissions that are destabilizing the planetary atmosphere and causing global warming. So really, the question ultimately is, can migrant remittances and diaspora investment, the investments by those successful migrants who have managed to go to host countries, become very entrepreneurial individuals and their networks, can these together in material, practical ways help improve climate resilience, or that is the ability to continue to function in the face of climate risks, and that's climate resilience. So the overall objective is to maximize the impact of these remittances for resilience and sustainable land use, along with diaspora investment and thereby producing local economic and social benefits that would include benefits for rural youth, and thereby hopefully adding to incentives that will enable these people to stay in their home countries in a productive way and avoid the very painful dislocation of families. As Pedro has indicated, each remittances flow is the financial sign of a family dislocation. Again, overview, these resources now dwarf official development assistance and even foreign direct investment in low and medium income countries. They're a lifeline for more than 800 million family members and at least 200 million family members just here in Africa, in the African context. Migrant diaspora investors do invest in land and agriculture and related enterprises. My colleague yesterday talked about that spectrum of risk-return preferences that come from the diaspora. Some are on a fully philanthropic orientation, and others are at the full risk-return calculus of regular market investment. Interestingly, aside from the really heroic work on collecting systematically data that has gone on, and IFAD has played a very, very seminal role in this, along with the World Bank, we now have a very good picture of migrant remittances. Interestingly, we do not have the same systematic overview of diaspora investment, which is an interesting kind of knowledge gap, if you will. So I think in our proposed first set of activities, which we're calling climate-focused market assessments, this is an opportunity, in addition to other inquiries, to shed greater light on diaspora investment. Are we? Okay. So component one, climate-focused market assessments of remittances and diaspora investment. Again, we believe that if this is done correctly, it can make a very serious contribution to global knowledge on an issue that has not had a lot of attention to illuminate a very, very potentially catalytic bridge between these resources. And it's not just money, it's also creativity and entrepreneurship and market networks and knowledge in a world where even where people are now digitally connected. It is a completely different world. Migration now is much more embedded in near costless communication and the ability to transfer resources. So the remittances will be a market diagnostic. We want to know in practical terms what are remittance families in rural areas using their remittances for, and with a particular focus on those activities in agriculture and related rural enterprises that can be deemed to be material efforts to improve climate adaptation and build resilience in the face of drought, increasing heat, shifting precipitation patterns, and so forth. So that's an enormously important thing, and we had a literature review that was presented yesterday, which indicates the diverse and rather scattered nature of the empirical work that's been done on this issue. We think, not that this is a research effort primarily, but we think that we can contribute to a much greater understanding of how people are actually using these important resources, these private family resources, to build resilience in the face of this critical, global, and very local and contextual threat. Likewise, we want to understand better diaspora investment practices and preferences and strategies with respect to investing or even mentoring or offering creative suggestions regarding actions to improve climate adaptation and resilience. Component two.
Okay, can we stop?
Yeah, I don't know who's forwarding this, but it's, yeah. Who's doing that?
Who's doing what?
Okay. Go, please.
Yeah, please ask
Yeah.
ask question. We can go component by component. I think it's a good.
Yeah.
I think it's better, actually.
Yeah.
Break the ice, please.
You know, as ever, I will I'm going to try and. I might need the summary version of the summary version. the, the, I understand the market assessment context, I think. That most of the focus is on rural production in the agricultural sector, right? So we're looking at markets to invest in. Well, I'm not sure I quite understand the component. Market diagnostic, use of remittances for adaptation. That's a different thing. That's two different points. So summarize what it actually looks like for me. What is a market diagnostic?
Okay, these are household surveys
All right.
primarily. Okay. Trying to figure out, to shed much more granular light on how remittance families are spending their remittances.
So it's a research piece to understand how the remittances are being spent.
Correct. In
Okay.
ways that foster sustainable land use and climate adaptation and ultimately resilience.
Okay.
On the one hand, on the remittances side and on the diaspora investment side, getting a better and more granular understanding of how that set of investors will and are and plan to invest their monies in projects, right, that would foster those goals.
It also includes the supply side analysis and the competition. Market diagnostic it's about competition analysis. You remember yesterday we discussed about the cost. So the cost, to reduce the cost, we need more competition. To foster innovations in the market, we need also more competition. So we start with the market diagnostic. We have some, we did so in many countries already. So this is part of what we call the Remitscope product. And it combines both the supply side analysis, who are the incumbent, who are the newcomers, what are the costs by corridors, the flows, migration patterns, financials.
How do people send the money home?
Yeah, how the people send money home, but who are the players in the market as well, and where can we influence the market so we reduce the cost and we also foster innovative and inclusive services linked with remittances. This is our ambition, and there are some Remitscope reports. So for instance, in Africa, we did 7 report on markets.
I think my confusion is coming from the climate focused. So I understand that we want to understand how much of it is being used for market, for adaptation, understand that. But if we're talking about leveraging remittances and diaspora investments, climate is one pot of money that we can use for leverage. GEF, GCF, other climate investments from the private sector, that's a leverage thing, right? But in the rural areas, parallel to the climate finance is the agricultural finance. Actually, taxes, subsidies, incentives going into the agricultural sector. So actually in the market assessment question, would we look at those as well as potential players in the market? That doesn't come across to me. I think it's the title of the component more than anything that's confusing me about what we're trying to actually do.
The title can be changed. The reason for the term climate is that it is a common thread throughout the focus of the assessment. But in terms of land use practices, those go beyond mere considerations of climate. So that could be altered. In the broader paper, they're both included. So perhaps agricultural, sustainable agricultural practices or land practice, something like that.
I think you're looking at both.
Right.
Sorry, I think you're looking at both. You're looking at climate. If what we're talking about is understanding the market, and what we want to try and do is leverage. We want to look what the market is and the kind of resources that are going into that market that could be leveraged. And climate is one stream, very definitely. Agriculture, maybe infrastructure. There's other streams as well. But anyway, just as an observation, sorry.
It is the title, and maybe the title should just be on markets with an S and then the list. Indeed,
Right.
because
That-
the
that's
idea is
easily
we're
fixed.
connecting several markets. We know how to do the remittances market assessments. We're very proud of the tool called RemitScope. You can check it out, but this is the best place where all the data is combined. And by the way, we want to thank the European Commission for their support on that, because it's thanks to them that we did this. But it goes beyond the flows. The idea is you want to provide a support to the private sector, those that are in the business of remittances. Where are there still areas that are untapped by the market? We want to give that to the practitioners, and we want to say what the other people needs, and we want to cross-check, because that's the tool that we have in Remits of maps as well. Markets in rural areas, digitalization in there. What are their needs? The markers of climate. That's what we want to link. What do they do with these remittances? As we saw, I wanted to mention in the case of I'll give you in a second, but the case of the needs of Filipino families in Mabini Batangas, and to construct houses that are typhoon resistant. They were explaining what they had to go through that. What are the market to support them? This is not connected. So here I think when we talk markets is to put an S and adapt create a dedicated strategy, but just with the right guidelines. I think this is what the proposal says. You need to look at that, and then you apply it to the particular country or conditions that are needed. We cannot have a fit for all, but the guidelines is that. So, but I fully agree with what you're saying, and thank you for pointing it out. We need to work better, I think, into the title, because the description is indeed sort of there, but you're absolutely right. I think Fernando wanted to say something.
No, just since I'm a little new to this particular program, my takeaway is to see if I really got it. I think because it's complex, you're right, because first of all, you already have a wealth of experience on market diagnostic and remittances. Then, as Steve said, I understand that there are two separate, yet intertwined, but areas of study. Migrant remittances and how are they used and what are their preferences, etc. And then investment. And I was intrigued by what you said. I think if we don't know a lot about diaspora investment practices, and I wonder how, good luck, because I don't think it's going to be very easy to explore this area, yet I believe it's very important. Then on a parallel note, I loved the seminar, and I thought it was the timing was very good, because it connects things that people don't logically connect. That is land degradation and impact of climate change as part, not the only, but a main reason for people having to leave to the cities or going abroad and migrate. And then the opportunity through remittances to really share know-how, good practices, and investment, so that as a result, the rural development in the countries of origin can be much more climate resilient. So I think at some point, I don't know if that's what Luisa was referring to, it's important really to tell, okay, what's new about these studies, no? Compare, because come on, you already had the RemitScope, and it's a great product, and so what are we adding with this, no? And then, well, then I have some observations on investment practices, but I think I'll leave it for later. Thank you.
Just wanted to add about climate focused. We add that because this is something that has not been done so far, as Fernando just said. So we have a long track record working on remittances, financial inclusion, cost reduction, which is very high in the agenda, but not climate focused. So this is why we have added this on top of the component. There's a need to build a body of evidences that remittances are addressing climate issues. And we need to also showcase opportunities for the private sector, for public stakeholders as well. Where are the opportunities? For instance, if we talk about the products that are linked to remittances, we more and more we are talking about green remittances, so direct remittances to purchase solar lamp, solar power systems. We can also imagine direct payment of insurance premium for weather insurance, input acquisition remotely by migrants, and so on and so forth. So just to provide a couple of examples that we would like to highlight in the diagnostic to incentivize the private sector, to highlight opportunities for market players, and also for public and players and donors that can support, provide incentive to develop this kind of product. For instance,
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. And this is Asha from Ghana. I've seen that this work you have done here, in fact, the findings are not done in a vacuum. A lot of research has gone into it. But looking at the component one, you have the use of remittances for adaptation. And there was a household survey that was done, which support this point. I want to find out if it's possible to share some of this work with us. I'm looking at the situation out there where remittances are sent to parents for daily needs, for feeding, for taking care of their medical needs and all that. But this adaptation has not come out with our experiences on the ground. So I wish you could give us this survey that was done, that we know how we can train our efforts towards this adaptation effort. In fact, when you are running projects in Africa, communities are expecting certain form of support. We need to is there any support in terms of providing chemical fertilizer, supporting them in the use of compost manure? In fact, it has been support. And so my point is, if these remittances are coming to them and they are using it for these adaptation options, why should they be calling on this sort of interventions? Support us to do this, support us to do that. It's not that we did not start the project with them. Like any community that we go to start a project, we come out with this watershed planning exercise. They themselves decide on what they have to do with a little guidance though. Yeah. So let's see if we can share this survey with us so that we see how we can go around the issues here. In fact, it's a new thing altogether, this remittances thing. I've read a lot about it, and I've seen that a great deal of support has been going down to sub-Saharan Africa. And even in Ghana, we are the second recipient in sub-Saharan Africa. And so if we get this information to help us to be able to connect the dots and ensure that the right thing is done, for us to come out with a good proposal on the Triple S. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent intervention. Component one is a proposed set of activities that have not been done yet. But when these surveys are conducted and collated and analyzed, They will be immediately disseminated to countries as an important knowledge product. You make also an excellent observation that people are already, farmers and other rural enterprises are already engaged in practices to help them better respond to things like drought or shifting rainy seasons or rising heat, etc. That's very true. Component two would be a very practical attempt to give those remittance families in agriculture some very practical tools on how to do that based on sort of state of the art knowledge about climate and weather information and so forth. So it's about capacity building, greater know-how, but it is not to suggest that people on the land are somehow completely clueless on this issue. That obviously is not true. And as I said yesterday, it is somewhat presumptuous for city dwellers to tell people living on the land in Ghana or anywhere else that you don't know anything about a changing climate. I think they know more about it observationally than most people. So the issue is to provide the capacity, the know-how, the awareness to use these more effectively and more productively. That's what the idea is. But the first component, when that is done, those results will be immediately disseminated. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Just for some clarity, when you look at the three areas that component one looks at least maybe not understanding totally what the market diagnostic is, it seems to be looking at the remittances, diaspora investment from the individual aspect. What I'm not seeing is how does this link with the national development planning? How does this link with the regulatory environment? So I'm not seeing where this comes in, because, and even when we look at the opportunities, again, my question is why focus specifically just on rural youth opportunities for youth? What about the other key stakeholders there? We know that, for example, drought, etc., women, for example, are affected the most. Where do those kind of aspects come out? How will we tease those out?
Those are also very good questions. The issue of having these four components, it looks that it's somehow linear in time. The fourth component, policy outreach and engagement, is very much an important part of this proposal because clearly public authorities, national stakeholders, public, private, civil society, as well as a host of other stakeholders that can provide useful, productive inputs in actually helping improve the enabling environment for a whole host of regulatory and other issues that can facilitate resilience and more sustainable land use is very much a part of this. It just comes in the way it's proposed. It's in a separate component so that it's a bit more, consistent. In terms of youth, youth is a priority but not an exclusive focus. And I hope I can say that certainly women and girls and traditionally disadvantaged groups is what EFAD does. And it's almost redundant. I mean, we can put that language in, but EFAD, I think, has been a leader in inclusion of those groups in virtually everything they do. So this was a PowerPoint, and we were trying to keep it, but clearly in the paper there'll be ample modification to shine the light on the role of women and girls and other, again, traditionally disadvantaged groups.
If I may, definitely the gender dimension is in there, but I think you just made the point, the argument for component one. We don't have that information. As we say, this was built on all the evidence and anecdotal evidence. I would like to call it like that. as seeing that when we're looking into remittances, its use, and diaspora investment, climate kept popping up everywhere. And why do you do that? And this is why I would like later on to show the video. It keeps popping up. And then there's a life after the financial services. There's a life after investment. And that's, well, the last mile that maybe we have not done. And then I think where the 3S initiative is so innovative is because we're going to do that linkage. Grounded on experience that we have, this doesn't come out of thin air, or it would be too much to do in one go. But I think you just made the point. I need the evidence to make sure that this is adapted to the reality of Ghana. That's exactly what is proposed. It is not an international study that was done about migration remittances and we're just going to grab it and apply it. No, you cannot do that in our country. You need to be more specific if you want particular policies to be adapted. The idea of the research also includes, do you have a national financial inclusion strategy or not? Because trust me, if you're going to be dealing with remittances, you should include it as well. When would be the moment where, you know, in the planning this, that you could put a national strategy related to agriculture, climate, or financial inclusion that would come together. This is what it's supposed to do. So when we say market assessments, the regulatory framework is a big part of it. But I fully get your point. What do you mean by market? That's a big word indeed. But for us, it's fuel in terms of detail. And again, this is a PowerPoint. But point well taken, because that means in the narrative of these guidelines that are being proposed, that should be really clear, and maybe even schematic schemes should be visual to understand, because the takeaway from yesterday is this is not for one ministry or one stakeholder alone, it's for a set of, and without that, it doesn't work, because it comes from so many angles. So I think you just and I wish we had the information, because that would put us in the implementation timeline already, which would be great. Sorry. Oh yes, please.
So thanks, Catherine. That's a good point around why the focus on youth, and as Steve mentioned, it's a PowerPoint thing we're trying to get to make this program as inclusive as possible. But just to give you an idea, when we look at youth opportunity here, we're looking at 340 million youth that by 2030 will be ready for work, that if not integrated in the economies, in the rural economies where they live, they will likely migrate either to the city or abroad. And definitely something, one of the reasons for that migration is also a lack of certain skills that they have to improve their livelihoods using the olden ways of doing agriculture. One way, and then the opportunity for youth here is that we've seen from other projects is that when we talk about remittances and adopting new climate-smart approaches to agriculture, it is youth that are most likely to be the entrepreneurial ones to take on the new ways of doing things if we manage to motivate them and persuade them that that's possible. So this does not exclude women, of course, and the disadvantaged groups, but yeah, it's a point well taken.
Can I add one point? So if you look at the in-depth remit scope diagnostic that we have produced for 9 countries now in Africa, you will see that they are structured in a way that there are several sections addressed. One is on the migration and remittances flows and patterns and costs. A second one is on the financial environment. A third section is focused on the regulatory environment and framework. A fourth one is on the remittances market structure. A fifth one on the financial services for the users, the remittance users. And a fourth one is an overall explanation of all the stakeholders that are present in the field and the coordination among them. Now, you have to imagine all those sections expanded with lens on climate. So imagine the amount of work that will be behind, but all those different sections, from the migration flows to the financial environment, the regulatory environment, the structure, the financial services, all the different stakeholders that are working in the field of remittances, but that are also connected and linked to the climate angle in the country. So this will be a work putting together all the different entities that are on both sides of this exercise, so that to create an overall picture of all the different stakeholders, laws, angles that needs to be taken into account in order to come out then with an innovative approach that can really address the topic of the discussion today.
Yeah, I think right now, I think I just have a discussion, so to interrogate these components and to either improve or, so I think the point I was trying to make is that if you look at the first two, where you're looking at the market diagnostic, then the diaspora investment, they're broader, and then yet when we go to the opportunities, we only look at the youth. So I think the suggestion I was trying to make there was the opportunity should be looked in a broader context, but obviously we will have a priority on youth. So I think that was the suggestion I was just trying to make there, that rather than just focus, let's start with a broader and then, yeah.
The good news is this is exactly how the design is intended. The bad news is that we did a bad job in the words of the PowerPoint. So I would like to deeply apologize for that, because we try to simplify, because we were not sure how many pages can be read, analyzed, and come here. This is for many a new topic. So in component one is, you're going to get all the information you need, connecting all the dots between all that, right? Yes, the answer is right. Why are we putting in a component? It's because it costs. This is not one consulting firm is going to do the job and that's it. We've seen a lot of that. That's just failure. And the failure then is hidden into the topic. It wasn't good. The consulting firm, no one takes the blame. And this is the problem. So it is a very serious component, and it needs to be number one in here. It is not anecdotal. Every other activity here will depend on the information, and this needs to be carried out exemplary. So this is the point. This is how we put it, and it needs to be expanded even further, connecting with other thematic. On the remittances and diaspora, we know what to do and not to do. We're good on that, and I think on climate we need to, but it's on the synergies. This is where the real work will be done on that lifeline, from remittances to whatever, the market, et cetera, to its use in climate adaptation. How can we maximize that? For that, we need all the information. Component one is just all about this, basically.
Louise, you're still not happy.
No. It's not. It's. I'm trying to come back to my individual, rational decision making, and sharing a story. I had a Nigerian boyfriend for the longest time. So I'm slightly invested in this. Western Union used to send me Christmas cards. So I think my challenge comes when I've been remitting money. There's been the remittances for direct consumption, schools and medical bills largely, and the investment wasn't a survival investment. I mean, it never worked, but it was supposed to be an investment that made money. And so I think my concern, and I can't put my finger on it quite yet, but my issue is, when adaptation, we're always talking about a survival, right? Well, I think we are. Well, at least that's how I would understand it. Kind of, something horrible is happening. Let's adapt so that we can at least get through this next stage. I would be keen that at least when we're talking about climate focus, it tends to me to kind of go towards that survival element. The world's going wrong. Whereas the investment piece, I hope, is about investing for the future and building paradise on earth, and a kind of sustainable economic development and growth and kind of opportunity. What I would hope we avoid is that diaspora investments and remittances are just to maintain the status quo. It has to be more than the status quo. It has to be a perspective so that people can go.
But the status quo for them, that's the reality, because the status quo for many people here might not be the same for a remittance family or a diaspora, and I think this is, it needs to be grounded. It is not, well, you're just using these remittances. Let me judge how you use them. You know, and the adaptation here, when we look at those that want to basically build a house once in their lifetime and not every other year renovate because the typhoon again took it away, and it needs a loan to do it properly. This is just a lack of financial services, and their remittances are received on one side of the street in a microfinance, in a Western Union, and the potential loan that they don't get because they don't have any credit history is on the other side of the street. This is my acquaintance with remittances in Honduras. And we had a microfinance institution that didn't know that most of their clients were receiving $200 on the other side of the street. Therefore, credit assessment, you want a loan? Let me see. Well, what do you do for a living? Well, not much. That's it. They didn't know that remittances were being received. And when they knew, they says, well, these remittances, what are they? They didn't know that it was so regular. They didn't, there was no attempt in saying could we sort of, in a way, like some other financial institutions have done later on, and I think we had experience, is securitize this. There was no securitization approach to this. So that could be one, and it is directly linked to the adaptation. On investment, I fully agree, but again, this is on the diaspora that is interested in more and more on green. And there's so many things happening, and no one is looking at diaspora or their capital as connecting it. So it is. Okay. I get the point.
When it says climate focus, I just get a little bit nervous that what we're doing is survival. That's all. But in the investment case, that's where I
You're absolutely right. A lot of people think of adaptation as, just getting to the next day. I guess the tyranny of PowerPoint is words like productive get omitted. The approach, I think, that IFAD wants to take here is to adapt, which is the process of better anticipating, measuring, and planning for a suite of risks, and ultimately with the goal being a productive arrival at resilience. So it's not just surviving, it's actually being more productive as a producer in whatever context it might be, and that's the approach. So it can be modified. The climate thing, part of the title can be altered to better reflect, but.
At the end of the day, what we're trying to get here is we're getting that feedback of the interpretation of this, of, I might say, this toolkit, or it's almost like that we want to call it, but fully agree.
And Louise, I don't know if you remember this pyramid. So we want to take people to the next stage. So at the moment, remittance, they keep people in a kind of, let's say, livelihood. They are less vulnerable, but their adaptation strategy is very, it's very spontaneous. So what we want is to take them to the next stage because they are eager to adopt new practices, and more than, let's say, other people in a rural area. So this is why we have this focus. So sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive because for IFAD, we focus on the very vulnerable. So we have to justify why we should also work with the less vulnerable. This is because there are some spillover effects. So not only they are eager to adopt new practices, but there are spillover effect also for other rural households. So this is there's double advantage to work with a remittance recipient.
Yes, a small question. I can imagine that the use of remittances is interesting, but are you also looking at the decision-making process? So who's actually deciding on the investment? Is it the person that is sending the money, or is it receiving family? And whether that is is also shifting over time?
Very good question. And again, the word investment sometimes is an umbrella term that includes migrant family remittances. In some sense, they are investments in human capital through health and educational expenses. And then there's the more sort of traditional function of actual investments, flows that go into projects with an intended or return. When you're looking at an assessment like this, you are trying to tease out essentially behaviors and decision, the locus of local decision-making at the household level on how these resources are spent or deployed. And then likewise, it's a cleaner, I think, measure for investment, which goes into a set of productive activities with a risk-return calculus. But yes, at the household level, by the surveys and so forth, we'll ask those kind of questions. Who makes the decisions? What are the criteria? How do you view, and trying to cut through jargon, trying to avoid lots of the jargon that that are policy science, words like climate adaptation, climate resilience, getting to actual behavior, decision-making, and actions. So I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
May I just add, I'm not sure we had the chance of having you yesterday, correct? That's absolutely understandable. And then just to clarify again, one thing that came out is it's families' choices. What they need is more options to use their funds, be more aware. The idea is to maximize, is not take and put somewhere else, but it is to offer more options that meet their needs. So their investment needs as well. So it's to illustrate that. We strongly believe, and from all the exercises that we've done, be it on remittance, on savings from remittances, or from investment diaspora, the needs that they have, the aspirations, need to be looked upon first. You can add to that and open new horizons, new appetite for other things, but it is always customer-centric, if I may call it like that. It is not, we grab and we put. We have this green fund, forget about your grandmother, give me money. Or this investment, you know what, we're building this investment, that's it, this is where you should be putting it. We try to avoid that, otherwise, even if the trick works, it might not be sustainable. It's a long-term approach that is decided, and there is an untapped market. If we could qualify, we should qualify this as a market. It is literally untapped, both the savings of remittances or the diaspora investment. It's totally untapped, it's left alone, and this is, I think, what we are trying to look at, and we see that climate is a big part on this, and many other priorities. So it is just really to support that more. And Fernando.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, to the risk of being a little repetitive, but I need to really, I think I'm understanding what you're proposing, and I think it's very pertinent, and so it's all about what is the value added with all this. I think, as I said, you're already a world reference in terms of the study of remittances. If I understood Mauro, this is like a new layer that we are including and connecting all the dots. And again, I think the challenge is, on the one hand, that there's a thematic interest. I mean, it's climate resilience and how, because we were discussing informally yesterday, remittances happen anyway, and people, whatever we do, people are going to be sending money, and they know, or they think they know what is the best use. Definitely they know when it comes to domestic remittances. But then what is intriguing and what we are exploring is, okay, what other opportunities may present themselves? And as you said, who's making the decision? Clearly the decision, I think, is the person who sends the money that makes the decision. So that's one thing. So the new layer of climate resilience, etc. And then there's the second one, which is studying investment as a market. And again, it has political nuance because you're working with not with the poorest of the poor that just send money to really pay for the school or for etc. But you're talking about people who are already more financially savvy, and they two challenges that I'm sure that we lived when we worked initially at the ADB. First, the more a person knows about has financial literacy and is, the more European or American he becomes, and the more, and it's difficult to change. Probably they think in a romantic way. At some point, I will buy a house and go back to my country. But when it comes to hard investment, I think you need, and that's why the first component is so important. You need hard evidence and facts, and as we pointed out, it has to be at a country level, because otherwise it's very different. The second one is, when you have that evidence, how do you interact with the local private sector, the investors that send the money, the banking system? Because what I saw in my experience is a total lack of trust. A lot of migrants don't trust the banking system, and the banking system initially doesn't care too much about these migrants. And so first, how do you connect both, no? And second, how to really identify good investment opportunities in the country of origin, because oftentimes they send the money and a cousin has an idea of having a video club, and it's a disaster. And so how do you identify solid interesting investment opportunity? And that connects a lot with fiscal incentives and regulatory environment, etc. And third, how do you, and that's, I think that's one of the most difficult parts, to find valid local counterparts that can be trusted by the migrants, particularly by successful migrants, for these 500 billion euros in savings. And I understand they only send like 10% or 15% to the countries of origin. So how do you have this confidence and this counterpart? Then, so no, I think those are the most important challenges. Then there's the word adaptation. I think adaptation has a bad reputation as a concept, no? Because I like more climate resilience, because I think people have to understand that it's not that they should adapt to protect the planet. I think African countries are a little fed up saying, okay, now the West or the North, they want us to stop using fuel and stop cutting trees, but they don't offer opportunities. No. Then there's, and finally, I like very much, and we're starting to explore it in Spain, the connection with circular migration and with temporary, I think it's temporary, I mean, you have, for instance, there are 19,000 Moroccan women, basically, that come to pick up strawberries every year to Spain. How can we help and teach them and have know-how, so that, particularly in the case of Morocco and Spain, it's interesting because actually the harvest don't coincide. So actually, if you establish this trust, you could actually not only benefit from know-how, but actually establish also trade relations. Perhaps the producer in Spain of tomatoes, when there are no tomatoes in Spain, I mean, improvising, they can import tomatoes from Morocco, for instance, no? And last but not least, I was very interested about all the discussion on youth and how do you dignify rural work, because that's also very difficult, and that poses a lot of challenges. And linked to this, and I promise I'll stop there, we work in Spain, we work a lot with IFAD. We had 300 million euros in a trust fund for small farmers. And now we have a second generation of projects. We have projects identified in Brazil, the Dominican Republic, Senegal, Rwanda, Tanzania. I think it's so precious what you do that I think it's a pity that somehow, I don't want to put put more work on you, but to connect all these findings and to incorporate that in components of the big loans that we are doing. Because I know for a fact, for instance, that now, as we speak, we have with the state of Ceará in Brazil, 100 million euros program, 9 million from IFAD and 92 from us. And an important component has to do with climate resilience. So I would like to really connect a little more what the facility is doing and you as a group of experts with the biggest loans that what we're doing. Thank you. Too long.
No, not too long. And more than that, you want to? Correct. We need it is just in parts because it's so packed. But we basically agree with everything that you said, and these are the challenges. I'm trying to simplify the issues through my experience as much as possible to try to convey it. Mainstreaming, we call it in IFAD. We have all these huge loans, etc. The FFR has done 70 projects in 50 countries. We've got a lot of wealth of information, and the tendency would be, how can this topic be mainstream in this big loan? Well, there's many entry points, but it requires effort. It requires specific attention. I don't have time for that. Just give me the money, and we'll see, because it's too complex already. There's too many priorities. So I would like to tell Spain this is an issue. Now, is that a deal killer? A deal breaker? Absolutely not. But exactly. In this case, it is the opportunity is there. But I think what this proposal is trying to do is open new horizons. This should become tomorrow's new normal. How did we go for so long without taking that into consideration? It's not pompous what I'm saying. I'm talking about 1 billion people in the planet involved. We're talking about 5 trillion by the time we reach 2030. It's a lot on aggregated, and it's a lot at a family level. I mean, for me, it's mind-boggling, but okay, maybe because I'm too focused on this every day. But the opportunities are there just for IFAD. Now, for all the other programs that exist that are not doing it, or at least are maybe doing the same mistake, if I may call it, or missing the opportunity. So I fully agree with that. What you were mentioning also on the value added, and I really would like, when we get to the next component, basically, which will be about cases, is to illustrate that, because the possibilities that we have identified are immense. Everybody's after green finance. A financial institution that can be labeled green, a financial institution, a microfinance institution that can be labeled green, I'm sure it's very nice for them. They're doing it, they're not being labeled as green. That's it. There's already here, I think, a big opportunity, because many that are of the MFIs that are actually taking into account remittances and offering credits on that are green at the end of the day, because the diaspora might be investing on those MFIs or the remittances that they try to channel. This is a missed opportunity. So this is just one of many opportunities that we see to create those bridges that are here. This is the good news about remittances, is if we don't do anything, I can guarantee you that $5 trillion will flow to the developing world by 2030 without moving a finger, because it will happen. The thing is, can we make that it's actually more. This is at no growth. And for the remittances, for the last 20 years, they've been growing at 10% on average. Sometimes there's dips, sometimes so it's more than 5 trillion. But we keep it conservative. This is the great thing. As somebody you know before, is all the figures on remittances are wrong. They're all underestimates. So this is the reality of what we're looking, but the dots are not being connected. This is really a first attempt of connecting outside of the sphere of just remittances and diaspora, and mainstream more with other, but not just at the level of IFAD, which we can propose. I think two divisions here working together, it's what we're proposing, but I think at governmental level, it is also required. One of the questions that I have, because we had a bunch, but we're afraid that you might not know or not want to ask, is do you have strategies that include the connection of these topics? Financial inclusion strategies, do they take into account remittances? because if not, that's a good way to start if we want to reach here. You might not have the answer, but it is important that as we plan this on both sending and receiving side, this is a transnational phenomenon. The receiving sides need to include this. The sending side should focus more than just the cost of remittances. I think IFAD working in the G20 now as support reaching to that. The agenda is not just about let's reduce the cost from all sending countries. We know who they are. They're basically most of them in the G20. They're moving to how can we maximize those flows. Over the last 2 years, there was a drastic change in that regard, but the financial inclusion action should be inclusive of that. And this is just for financial inclusion. Let's think about the climate discussions that do not take into account this topic. I think this is the main effort, and instead of just making big symposiums where we will discuss this for 3 days, I think what this proposal is saying is let's start doing it and put a framework that we start in a country, and then if that works, then others will follow suit. I think this is the approach that we are trying to, if it makes sense.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes,
because
and I think we have also
coffee is, because coffee is served outside. So, and the discussions that you just had are the perfect transition to the second and third component, which are the two components more operational. I think if you agree, we can take that question, of course, and then maybe we can go for a short-term coffee and come back and address component 2 and 3.
Many thanks. No, it's a question that in any way it's applicable to other components, and I think it's of interest also for the others. To stress that, I mean, very ambitious and very makes sense, but the question is, I mean, I think it could also start thin and expand. The question is whether you have already done some of the diagnostics that are indicated are part of the action. So the market diagnosis on the migration patterns, and also the existence of some of the preconditions that would facilitate in a context, in a country versus others, in a province versus others, to have, for instance, a marketplace, etc. Because it looks big, it looks nice, but I mean, I understand you are thinking about this many countries. I don't have the full list of all the countries you have in mind, but I think in the end, it should be, I mean, as speaking as a representative of a donor, the European Union, I mean, just to start thinking about that, it would be important to understand whether there are provinces of which countries where you, based on what you already know, it could have more quick, let's say, chances of result and relevance, considering also the context of instability that in some of these countries reign. So just wonder whether you have any additional reading on the patterns, the precondition, and voila. That's it. In general, not of course, I don't expect a reply immediately, but I mean, in general.
I would like to start the answer, and then we go for coffee, and we continue because it's absolutely relevant. Yes, the answer is yes, and I can take a case right now. We're working on Honduras, and we just had a map, and we had the province, and we're seeing where it's relevant. So it is exactly to apply that approach. As I mentioned to Luis, we know what to ask and we know what not to forget, and the mistakes not to make in many of these ways of remittances and diaspora investment and on a climate, and we're putting it together. But the idea here was it's more of an approach, a guideline that can be applicable at national level. On practical terms, a country says, I have a lot of migration, everything indicates that this is important for us, we would like to apply it to our country. And let's start with the regions of highest migration, or what the survey indicated, the regions where diaspora came from and would like to invest in priority, and demonstrated that the climate is an important issue. That's the starting point. With that, we know how it can trickle down. But we should start small, and I don't think that this should be, this needs to be a 55 program from the get-go. It needs to, we believe that it's going to prove how it works. It could be, but it's more the approach rather than a program.
I'm going to just jump in just to say from the European Union, with another hat on, I'm from UNCCD and the Global Mechanism with the host of the Great Green Wall Accelerator for in the Sahel. And under Pillar 4 of the Great Green Wall Accelerator, all of the elements around the 3S initiative, around migration and sustainability, are there. So I think for us, there's also a very nice overlap with that work as well.
And with that, we go for coffee.
Yes, coffee is served outside. I would suggest to be back in 20 minutes, if possible. 11:30. Thank you.